Okay, lesson 5 is the most important lesson in Unit 2. It's also the longest one. There's a lot of stuff in it. Okay? It's the kind of lesson that contributes to the misunderstanding people have about biology. Okay? That misunderstanding being biology is just about being able to memorize things and then regurgitate them on the test. And while memorizing facts is an important part of biology, you're going to find that we don't stop there. Okay? We want you to know those facts because we want you to apply them to situations. So yes, you'll get some questions on a unit exam like, okay, what is this part of the cell? What does it do? Yes, we'll ask that. But we'll also ask, a cell is in this situation. Given what you know about the parts of the cell and the functioning of the cell, what effect do you think this situation will have on the cell and how will it react? That says, okay, I need to know that this kind of situation affects the cell in this way, and I know what this part of the cell does, and now I can use those two things together to figure out what would happen to the cell. Okay? There's a lot of application in biology, okay? More so than most people understand, and that's why, believe it or not, biology is usually the poorest unit exam in Science 10 because people only prepare for it by memorizing instead of thinking of ways they could apply what they know. So this would be my suggestion to you. Here's a great place to use AI responsibly. Okay? You do your part in the memorization. Okay? To learn what each of the parts of the cell does, all that, be able to label the diagram if I give you a blank one, yeah, that's important. Okay? Once you've committed that stuff to memory, go into Gemini and ask it, give me an application question about cellular structure or cellular transport. Just, let's say grade 10 science. And it'll usually spit out pretty good situational application questions for you to try. And it's usually pretty good at providing you a reasonable answer and explanation for that answer. That's kind of the difference between Gemini and ChatGPT. ChatGPT will give you an answer, but its explanations are often limited. Gemini will give you an answer, and it will explain the answer. Okay? That's why we've chosen to use it, okay, for our stuff, for Google and here at school. Okay? So that's a great place to use that when you're preparing, you want to study, ask it to make those kinds of questions up, and it does a decent job, for sure. Okay? All right. So, operations and functions of the cell membrane, okay, or cell and membrane transport. So, the first and most important word we want to focus on here is this one, compartmentalization. Okay, so that one there, underline that. Compartmentalization means that the cell is broken up into different internal rooms or different internal compartments. Okay? There are two kinds of cells, or classes of cells. Prokaryotic cells, prokaryotes, and eukaryotic cells, or eukaryotes. Okay? Only eukaryotes have compartmentalization. Okay? That's why I've drawn that arrow from eukaryotes to compartmentalization. Okay? That means the diagrams that we just labeled, those are of eukaryotic cells. They have organelles. They have parts inside. And they have a nucleus, rough ER, and all of that kind of stuff. Prokaryotes have none of those structures. Okay? They have no compartmentalization. And right now, that probably doesn't seem like all that big a deal, but think about the processes that are going on in each of those organelles. Like in an animal cell, you've got the lysosome. Inside there are digestive enzymes capable of breaking down cellular material. Okay? Because what you eat is the cellular material of other organisms. That's fats, proteins, DNA, okay? All of those kinds of things. Do you want those enzymes just floating around everywhere in the cell along with your DNA? I sure wouldn't. Okay, because they could digest my DNA. I feel like that would be a problem. Okay, prokaryotic cells, that's exactly what goes on. Okay, eukaryotic cells have all these different rooms where certain processes that kind of like to have perfect conditions can have their perfect conditions. Okay? So it works kind of like this. In your house, you have 3 different temperature environments. Okay? You have the bulk of the air volume of your house that you probably keep somewhere around 21 degrees, because that's a comfortable temperature for us. Okay? You have your refrigerator, okay, whose job it is to store food short term. You could take it out and eat it, okay, right away. That's probably going to be around 5 degrees Celsius. So you wouldn't want to live in there, it's cold. Okay? And then you'd have your freezer. Okay? Your freezer stores your food long term, but it's probably minus 15 degrees inside the freezer. You can't take food out of there and eat it directly unless it's a popsicle. Okay? So it's got a different job. That would be a eukaryotic cell. There's 3 different jobs: keeping you comfortable, short-term storage of your food, long-term storage of your food. They cannot occur in the same environment. A prokaryotic cell has to do all 3 of those jobs in the same environment. A prokaryotic cell is keeping your house at 8 degrees. You're cold, your food is going to spoil, and you have no way to store food long-term. Okay? You cannot do those 3 jobs very well. Okay? It's like being a jack of all trades but a master of none. Okay? That's what a prokaryotic cell has to do. But a eukaryotic cell can have an organelle that's responsible for digesting food, another organelle that's responsible for carrying out cellular respiration, okay? Another one that's packaging things for transport. All of that stuff happens in their own perfect environments. Is that a good thing? Does that make a cell more efficient? It certainly does. It's why eukaryotic cells are way bigger than prokaryotic cells. It also allows for specialization. You've got a lot of different kinds of cells in your body. Muscle cells that are designed to move you around, okay? Nerve cells, the cells that line your stomach, okay? They all look different because they're specialized to do different jobs. The way they specialize is by changing how much of each organelle they might have inside in order to help them do that job. So any organism that's multicellular has to be eukaryotic, because you have to have the organelles, the compartments, in order to become specialized. There are no multicellular prokaryotic organisms. Prokaryotes are all bacteria and blue-green algae. Now, there's still a lot, okay? Tons and tons of different kinds of bacteria, but they're very small. They don't specialize and they don't become multicellular. All right. So other things we're going to go over: role of each organelle. Okay. Understand that the cell is a complex system of interdependent processes. Interdependent means process 1 needs process 2, process 3 needs process 2 and process 1, and process 1 still needs process 5 to work. Okay. They all depend on each other. If one of those processes fails, the whole system goes down. Okay. That's kind of the downfall of a eukaryotic cell. They're interdependent processes. If one of them breaks down, the cell's probably going to die. Okay? We're going to look at how the cell carries out its functions, and then we won't get to the transport part today, okay, but we will tomorrow. Okay, so cells are divided into compartments by membranes. So the mitochondria is a separate compartment within the cell. In fact, the mitochondria has a double membrane. Okay, and that's because inside there, cellular respiration occurs. That releases a lot of heat. The double membrane actually insulates the rest of the cell from the heat produced by cellular respiration. Okay? If you ever run a fever, because your mitochondria is just pumping away and it's making way more heat than it should, driving your body temperature up. When you're working out, same thing. You start to sweat because your mitochondria are burning more sugar, okay, to meet up with your energy demands. You get hot, you sweat. Okay, so compartmentalization. This one here should probably just underline or write down, if you don't have the notes package, that whole paragraph. That is the role, okay, or the importance of compartmentalization. Okay? It provides different local environments that allow the cell to perform metabolic functions not compatible at the same time. Okay, so really important to have those separate environments, like the furnace and the fridge and the freezer. Okay, different processes require different things. Okay, it's kind of like you know, you don't take your food into the bathroom to eat. Okay, the bathroom has a function, the kitchen has a function. You don't mix those two functions. Okay, they need to occur separately. So if we're kind of looking at compartmentalization, okay, that allowed cells to become larger. Prokaryotes are much smaller, okay, than eukaryotes, okay, and more specialized. So compartmentalization of cells allowed cells to become larger and more specialized. Okay, that's kind of the important part of that slide. Okay, that specialization that we'll talk about later on in the unit that led to multicellular organisms evolving. Okay, so you can see there in that diagram, it kind of gives you a sense of scale, right? A virus, most viruses are around 0.1 micrometers. They're really, really small. A typical prokaryotic cell, like a bacteria, okay, might be anywhere between 1 and 4 micrometers in size. Okay, very, very small. By comparison, a typical animal cell could be anywhere from 20 micrometers to 100 micrometers, okay, depending on what type of cell it is. Okay, they're much larger because, well, they got a lot more stuff going on. Okay, they got more structures inside, okay, and that allows them to grow more. Okay, if you are doing things more efficiently, you're usually going to result in getting bigger. Like, imagine this: you have two identical twins, and they're separated at birth. Okay, one lives a life of like opulence, so they have like the best food and exercise and all of that kind of stuff, and the other one lives in poverty. Okay, malnourishment, not getting enough food, that kind of stuff. Well, when they're both fully grown, even though they're genetically identical, okay, one of them is going to be bigger, okay, because it's been able to get all the things it needs and use them properly. So the identical twin that lived in opulence is probably going to be like, I don't know, 6'2" and 185 pounds, okay? And the person who lived in poverty is probably, much shorter, maybe only 5'8", maybe only 125, 130 pounds, okay? Because they haven't had all of that stuff. Their body couldn't function as efficiently because it was just trying to keep them alive, okay? That's kind of, if you have a eukaryotic organism, they're doing things more efficiently, making better use of what they have so they can get bigger, okay? All right, the other thing you can see is in this diagram, you can see like the different parts of the animal cell. This bacterium is just labeled bacterium. None of the stuff inside is labeled because the only thing you can see inside is its DNA. That's what that snarl of stuff is there. Okay, there's no nucleus, it's not protected anywhere, and all the other stuff that goes on inside that cell goes on right next to it. Okay, it's literally like eating in the bathroom. Okay, you are doing two jobs that should not be combined in the same place. Okay, making sense there? So that's the importance of compartmentalization. All right, we'll leave it there for today, and we'll start all the parts of the cell and what they do tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be even more of me talking and you listening, unfortunately. Okay?